Let's get this party started, why don't we? What is going on, everyone? My name is Drew. What it do? Hopefully you are having a fantastic day today. And in today's video, it's actually going to be a podcast. If you guys have been enjoying the podcast series, I appreciate you for tuning in and week out. This will actually be one of the last video podcasts we'll do on the channel for a few weeks here, but you don't want to miss this one. This one's going to be really, really good. Today's guest is Karen Anthony, aka Liberty and Fox on Instagram, or Kaz. She is the senior director of merchandising for Nike Calvin Klein underwear. She holds incredibly prestigious title within the industry. I think you guys are going to get a lot of value out of this. If you're ever curious about what it's like to be working for these prestigious big name brands like Nike and Calvin Klein, this episode is going to bring you a lot of value. Without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast.
Do it.
Let's do it. All right. 3, 2, 1. Hope everyone is having a blessed day today. If you are new to the podcast, welcome. And if you've listened before, welcome back. Today's episode features one of the most decorated guests we've ever had on the show. This incredible woman graduated from RMIT in Melbourne, Australia. She is currently the senior director of global merchandising for Calvin Klein underwear and Nike underwear. Some of you may know her as Kaz or Liberty and Fox on Instagram. Allow me the honor of introducing the wonderful Karen Anthony. Karen, how are you doing today?
Drew, I'm great. What an introduction. Wow. That's cool. I appreciate it. I'm doing well. It's nice to chat with you.
Absolutely. Well, with someone who is as special as I believe, and done the research on, it's really awesome to have you on. And like I was kind of telling you before the podcast, I knew about you on through Instagram for a little while now, probably 5 months ish. Didn't really follow you, but just kind of kept tabs on the things that you posted because I always thought it was so well done. And yeah, I mean, now we're here, you on the podcast. I'm excited.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I do, and like Instagram is such an interesting place, right? Like it's this whole universe of its own. But it's kind of fascinating once you connect beyond that and understand a little bit more about the reality of what's behind the persona, I guess you could say.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
I appreciate those words. It's nice to connect with you.
Definitely. And I like, you're so right. After, seeing you now, hearing your voice, there's so much you kind of assume or just kind of generate an idea or persona about somebody based on the things that they post. And just doing the research, getting to know you and having a little conversation with you it's going to be a lot of fun. Let's dive into the first question, which is, what is your background? Where are you from? And how is it like for you growing up as a kid, Karen?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, and I gave you a heads up, with the accent coming into this, right? Not a lot of people know that I was born in Melbourne, Australia, lived there the majority of my life, almost all of my life. I'm actually first generation Australian though. So I'm daughter of immigrants. My mom is Puerto Rican. My mom's family is Puerto Rican. So you have a super colorful side on that family. My dad is actually Italian. My dad's family's from a little town about an hour outside of Milan, called Piacenza. So, my world's kind of like, came, from unexpected places, I guess you could say. My parents met abroad, met traveling, and came together and eventually migrated to Australia.
Wow.
And especially looking for new opportunities, especially my dad coming from a small town, a little bit more rural Italy, seeking new opportunities and created an amazing life for us in Australia. So
definitely. I've never heard of that combination. Puerto Rican and Italian. That is really, really special. Very, very cool.
What? I think it's like more common living in the US, right? Being in New York.
Yeah, totally.
I know more Puerto Ricans, Puerto Ricans here. I definitely know a lot of Italians. I know people that are of both both backgrounds. I think what was pretty unique was, growing up with those cultures in Australia,
Definitely.
especially, I did not know someone else with that same sort of background upbringing as I did culturally. But what was super cool about growing up in Australia is that it's very multicultural, and that's probably what I, really love, appreciate about it most, is just, we were surrounded by amazing, communities of people, cultures, races.
Totally.
It was pretty special growing up there.
Totally. And Karen, how was it like? What did you do as a little girl growing up in Australia? Like, what kind of things were you interested in? Were you into sports? Were you always into fashion? Were you kind of a creative or fashion inclined growing up? Tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, all of the above, to be honest. My mum was actually an art teacher growing up, so she always had paintings and cool things like that around the house. A lot of creative stuff around us, creative energy.
Yeah.
My dad was a printer by trade, so he used to work on these old printing machines, creating graphics, creating typography. So there was kind of like this presence of creativity constantly around me. Always interested in fashion, for sure. I think I took a liking to fashion and wanting to be part of the industry in some way, from a pretty young age. I think originally I wanted to be a designer, and I guess, that's probably a lot of people's dreams, like thinking about fashion and how they represent fashion. But I definitely took a liking to it, to style and fashion, from a young age, and sports was a huge part of my life. So yeah, that's part of probably growing up in Australia. It was a very big sporting nation. Played a lot of sport, watched a lot of sport. My dad was really into sport, so he kind of brought me up around it. And I think, not growing up with a family outside of my immediate family in Australia, I think what sport did was, allowed that sense of community, and you like building things as a team, understanding the importance of coming together and achieving a same goal, so that was like a huge play on my active life, but also, how I grew up, my mentality, my approach to things, my approach to other people, my style, everything. So yeah, that was a big one for me.
Yeah, totally. I can definitely attest to that as well. In terms of sports, for me, I played basketball, and everyone who's listened to the podcast knows this. But and just having this conversation with you, like, I played basketball all my life, and I can say that being an athlete, playing sports, has been one of the biggest determining factors for the way I think about the world, and then also being able to work with others, right? Because just the ability to manage personalities and attitude flares and just all these different dynamics that are going on. Ego is one of the biggest things that I feel like, that happens in sports, happens in business. You know what I mean?
Right.
You have a lot of times people who, want a role or don't, or aren't in a role that they feel like they should be in, or feel like they should input more than necessarily than they should, or whatever, whatever the complications of a situation may be, and you have to deal with it. You have to make everyone feel wanted and valued in that sense. What sports, before we kind of move on to your schooling, what sports were kind of big for you? Like, I want to know, like, the specific ones.
I swam from a young age. Swimming was probably like one of the first, sporting activities I really, like, my parents really got me into. Tennis. I moved on to tennis for many years.
Oh, love it.
Started playing competitively a little bit. I played what we call netball, which is not basketball.
Okay.
But a similar version of. We can get into the rule book like another time. But
let me just look this up real quick.
yeah. It's an interesting one, netball, volleyball. I did a lot of track and field. I really enjoyed like a huge breadth of
That's awesome.
sporting activities. And then I watched the things that I felt like I couldn't play: basketball, football, soccer.
Yeah,
And those are
totally.
probably the things that I really, really love now. So I'm not physically skilled, but I love watching them.
Do
Yeah.
you have an affinity for the NBA, or do
Yeah.
you care about the NBA? Like, what is your
Very much.
who do you have winning the championship this year in the NBA? Do you have any opinions?
Oh
Do you,
boy. Look, I think if you ask me, I'm a big LeBron fan. I think people who are
Same.
close to me know that.
I am
And I
too.
think we had this conversation a few weeks ago. I probably would have still been saying the Lakers, but I don't know now. I don't want to make any calls now.
Fair enough.
And for me, I feel like I enjoy the game and I enjoy the personalities. I love. That's, I think, why I gravitate towards a player like LeBron, as many do. His mentality and his toughness and his approach, and that's like what really also I enjoy watching with sport.
Totally.
So I feel like I love the game more than I do like a specific team.
No doubt.
Yeah.
I honestly, I'm the same way. I just wanted to ask you the question to see if you had any takes, and you're my kind of person because I'm a big LeBron fan myself,
Yeah.
and have been for a while. Let's talk about RMIT. So RMIT, you studied at RMIT. What does that stand for again? I don't want to botch it.
Yeah,
Say
it's the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology.
Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. You studied there. Talk to me about what it was like there, and what you kind of studied and how it kind of correlates to what you do now, maybe if it does.
Yeah, yeah, it does. So I did a diploma in clothing production with a focus on product development and merchandising. Um, my path of education wasn't traditional, I guess you could say. So, as I touched on before, I think in my ideal aspirations were to move into more of a design stream. And I think when I left school and I didn't get into the course that I wanted to get into originally, kind of led me down a different path of thinking. And I actually put school on hold. I put university on hold for a little while, and I actually started working. I got stuck straight into working, and I actually qualified as a makeup artist.
Oh
So
wow.
that I started sort of veering into, I guess, another creative outlet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I qualified as a makeup artist, and I worked as a makeup artist for many years. I mean, probably about 13 years all up. And
Wow.
um, that was kind of what I started to sort of get into. And over time, I sort of felt like there was still that calling for me to get closer back into fashion. With makeup, I was doing fashion week makeup and
Oh wow.
freelance makeup for brands and for myself, and working backstage and on photo shoots. So there was always a connection to the fashion industry. And I think at some point I just felt like I wanted to really go back and round off my education, my experience.
Mm.
And at that point I actually started working in retail, in the fashion industry, in retail, and then I put myself into RMIT, into school, and I went down the path of the course mentioned. So it was kind of like juggling a lot at one time,
Yeah,
but
it sounds like a lot.
yeah, it was a lot when I think back to it. Like working full time, studying at night, studying days, where I needed to, and yeah, it was a lot to juggle, but hugely rewarding. And the experience just kind of taught me that you don't always go down the path that you expect. It's going to take turns, and the journey isn't always planned, I guess.
Mm.
So sometimes you just have to follow your instinct and what feels right, and trust your gut instinct to sort of get you on the path that you're meant to be.
Definitely, definitely. And in those moments, can you talk about, a little bit what it was like for you doing all that work, excuse me, doing all that work and being in those moments, and like were there ever moments where you're like, is this truly right for me? Or did you know and you just kind of just kept your head down and continued to work no matter how maybe tiring or difficult it got? Can you talk to me about that a little bit?
Oh yeah, I had many of those moments. I had many of those moments of, is this the right thing? You're feeling overwhelmed, having a lot on my plate, feeling like I'm biting off more than I can chew. And I think just that's where passion kicks in, and that's where, true purpose kind of kicks in. And I think I've always, placed a great importance in work and in career, and I have a very strong work ethic. So I think that was always kind of built in me. The fact that I knew I wanted to achieve more. I knew I wanted to, get that diploma secured. I knew I wanted to progress my career, and that drive and that passion is kind of what was just always there to fuel
Mm,
that. Even through those times where I was like, this is a lot. This is hard. And not so focusing on just being in the moment, realizing there's a bigger picture.
down the line. Totally. I love that. And I think for a lot of people listening, I think there's a lot of key things that you said. One of them being that, when you set out in your journey, whatever your journey may be, it could be in music, could be in fashion, it could be in whatever, podcasting, creating, being a writer, right? You don't necessarily know, how each section of the journey is gonna go, right? And you might change your mind. As a young person, I've changed my mind several times on different things I wanted to do, and people change their mind all the time. And maybe you realize that this isn't really what you love to do. So if you're listening and you're, you know, pursuing something currently, be open to the possibility that maybe you can do it a little bit differently. Maybe it's the same thing, but do it a little bit differently, or take a different route, educate yourself more. She went to school, decided
Mhm.
to educate herself. I think it's really important to recognize these kind of forks in the road. They may lead to the same destination, but make the right decision for you, right?
Yeah, I agree. No, I think that's a really, great point. It's just, it's things are not always black and white, and we're not on the same path, and nor should we be. That's kind of what sets us apart as individuals,
Totally.
and makes us unique. And I have to say, like, I think what I find so interesting about what the people that I work with now, the people that I interact with now and associate with now, is that everyone has a different story.
Mm,
Not cookie cutter. We don't all come from the same background, where whether it's our family or our culture or education or our work experience. And that's like what we need to celebrate more of, that
absolutely.
bring different things to the table.
Absolutely. And I think I'll touch on that again because I think it's so important. I think you're so, so right. Um, the one of the things that I've done for myself is to free my mentality of comparison. Cause I think a lot of times we compare ourselves to, like, I want to be Virgil Abloh.
Mm-hmm.
Virgil Abloh's situation is just so absolutely unique that you don't really you do yourself a disservice to compare yourself to that someone who you idolize or something like that, whether it be a Karen Anthony or a Drew Joyner. You got to get it how you live it, and your journey is going to be unique, and everyone's going to have their own personal stories, just like she said. So,
Exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that should be celebrated.
oh,
Yeah.
totally. Let's talk about, I think you talked about it a little bit. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, where does your fashion career begin? Arguably, you could answer it starts, being a little girl is what you said, kind of. And
Mhm.
then you have obviously your schooling, but let's talk about after school.
Yeah.
After you were done, what is the kind of next phase in that journey?
Yeah. So I think, as I touched on, I started working in retail, fashion retail, shop floor, managing store, a store. And um, for me, that's, looking back, as important as what my education in school was. It was like working with products, hands-on with products, with customers, with the consumer. And that that never goes away, that experience. So that was
Mm-hmm.
kind of probably what, set like a base, I guess, for me when I think about, when I really sort of stepped into fashion. And at the time, I ended up being introduced to the buying manager of the fashion company that I was working for in Australia.
Oh, wow.
And it's about networking and just getting to know people and connecting with people. And she gave me an opportunity to temp in their office, and just to help out and get a few days in here and there, to having experience in the buying office.
Totally.
And that was probably that opportunity was what allowed me to kind of get a step in, or a foot in the door, to a more corporate setting. So to an actual product development buying office. And I remember vividly, this like experience never leaves my mind for some reason, but the first thing they made me do was cut denim swatches, like manually, with scissors, with scissors by hand, and I spent all day, like hours and hours and hours, just cutting swatches of denim, right? And I remember that moment we were just talking about, where you're like, God, what am I doing? Is this the right thing? What did I sign up for here? Am I just going to spend the rest of my days like cutting denim by hand?
Oh,
And
boy.
it was like, for some reason I just always think about that memory, and actually just what I took from it, which was that this is like grunt work. You're not handed a key to the kingdom, with your career. You need to get in there and roll up your sleeves and do the hard work, and that was what that moment was. Manual, it was laborious, but I got to be hands-on. I got to touch and feel, and understand fabric. I got to look at denim washes, and I got to really understand trims, and be very, very close to the most raw piece of what kind of fashion could have been.
Right.
So that was kind of one of my first experiences there, and then I really sort of spent the next few years just progressing and just putting in the hard work. And I ended up moving from temping into a buying assistant role, and then a design assistant role, and then a junior buyer and a buyer and a buying manager, and just progressed
Totally.
over the years. So a lot of hard work, but it really paid off.
Definitely. And I love that, because that is like, for me, you don't have any type of growth, any type of success really, unless you're really a silver spooner without the hard work. You got to work hard. And I think a lot of times people ask me, Drew, how do I start XYZ? How do I do this? You can have all the right techniques and all the right strategies, and they're very important. But if you don't, work really hard and just put the time in, and do the things that maybe you don't necessarily understand or don't want to do initially, because that they're going to result in something, better at the end of that kind of process, then, I mean, yeah, you have to work really hard. Let's talk about your role currently. I think I read it correctly: senior director of global merchandising at Calvin Klein and Nike's underwear division. Is that correct?
That's correct. I'll explain it a little bit, because I think and actually my role's since updated a little bit just recently as well, so it has evolved quickly. But yeah, the Nike piece of it, I think people question, how are you working for Calvin and Nike at the same time? And in 2019, we Calvin's parent company, Calvin Klein's parent company, PVH, acquired the license to design, produce, manufacture underwear, men's underwear for Nike.
Oh, wow.
So, pretty incredible opportunity for the brand, for the business, and certainly for myself, being able to then take on the global merchandising and regional merchandising function for that business. So yeah, so 2019, that was kind of added to my portfolio. I had been looking after the Calvin Klein men's underwear and loungewear business, for now what's been nearly 7 years.
Wow.
And so that was kind of like the addition to what I was doing. So hence the Calvin Klein and Nike piece of it. Yeah.
Definitely. How does that feel? I mean, just like from a personal standpoint, like, can you just talk about like what that feeling is to say that's a part of, your portfolio, part of your resume at this point,
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's it's work for me.
Yeah,
But
totally.
like when we talk about it in this situation, like I think, yeah, it's super rewarding. And I'm, very, very grateful to, to have that experience, to be part of such big brands, and such big moments in each of the brand. Obviously, with Calvin Klein, like synonymous, especially underwear in the industry. So, for for me, and especially moving from Australia, coming over and looking at what I've achieved over the past 7 years and working for a brand like that, and then being able to be part of the Nike brand as well through the licensing work. It's just kind of like a pinch me sort of moment sometimes. Like
Right.
it's pretty cool. I'm very grateful for it though.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine, and I love Calvin Klein's underwear. I have a
Good.
few.
We
I have a
didn't
few
talk
in my
about it
drawer.
beforehand, so yeah, good. I'm good. Correct answer.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna slander anybody. No, I think it's incredible to be in a role like that. And obviously where you come from and what you've been able to achieve, I think anyone can recognize you should be proud of that. And
Thank
I
you.
think that's what will resonate with a lot of people too. I think hopefully we're painting a picture of, an individual who grew up, you know, was involved in fashion and interested in fashion, put the work in, time in, and kind of cultivated a career that's desirable. Now, I do want to ask you, Karen, um, what is the penultimate? Where do you want your career to ultimately end up as? I know a lot of people say there's this term, I don't dream of labor, things of that nature, right? But what I'm trying to ask, I think hopefully you're trying to understand what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah.
Where do you kind of see yourself like reaching that most fulfilled state in work? Is it right now? Is there something more? Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, right? Because I think back to, like, let's say each moment where I achieved some level of success, was promoted, or took on something additional level of responsibility. And I guess you're always, aiming for that next thing and chasing that next thing. Like, when are you truly ever kind of satisfied and
Right.
feeling accomplished? For me, I probably would say, like, I'm at a point in my career, and there's a long way to go, but I feel really well accomplished right now. I
Mhm.
feel, like I said, grateful, happy for what I've achieved. Definitely very, very fulfilled with what I have achieved up until this point. And I think for me, like, a big part of my career now actually becomes sharing with others,
Mm,
developing a team. Like, that's a huge part of my role.
mm,
It's not only about, the merchandising, the products and the strategy and those things, but it's also like developing talent now, developing others that are coming up in the industry and need guidance, advice, support. Like that's just a much bigger part of my own personal growth now as a manager and as a leader, personally and within the company that I work for as well. So,
yeah,
I think that, yeah, that's fruitful as well. That, brings enjoyment for me. And
definitely.
uh, yeah, hopefully just new projects. The industry is evolving so rapidly. like with many industries. So, just looking forward to new ways of working. We work a lot with new innovation now, new techniques, and especially for a product like underwear, that's like where the challenge is sometimes, how do you continue to innovate on something that's so simple and so basic, I guess you could say.
Right.
That in itself is a challenge for the future, and how we can continue to evolve what we do with products, and continue to sort of move it along with the way that the consumer is shifting and the way that the industry is shifting as well. So there's a lot more to come. Yeah.
Definitely. I love that. And I think that's a perfect segue into the kind of the last question in this section. And on this podcast, I talk to a lot of different individuals about sustainability in fabrics and sustainability in within the industry of fashion. Has the topic of sustainability been something that, you and maybe your colleagues have focused on or brought up more, or is becoming a hot button item or hot ticket item more so because of the way in which the world is changing from a consumer mindset standpoint? Talk to me about that a little bit. That's my favorite line right now. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Good questions. Yeah, absolutely. A huge part of conversation. Every conversation that we have, I think even more so, it's becoming the norm. When we start to develop products, when we start to develop raw materials, fabrics and trims, our sourcing efforts, packaging, all the way through the product development offer, or what we do with the product development, we take consideration to sustainability now more than ever. So it's certainly a much more important factor. And I think, for me, what's critical to keep the sustainability conversation going and make it purposeful, really purposeful, is industry change. It's not only intent, messaging, right? It's
Great point.
Better practice, it's improved process, from factory level, from fabric mills through factories, through production, through sourcing. We require the industry as a whole. And again, this is not just the fashion industry, but beyond, to
totally
become more mindful and make it more of the norm. Improve practice, improve everything, to really sort of start building it into just the way that we approach what we do. So I think that's really what would be critical in shifting from just having that intent, which is the right intent, but just to really make it more purposeful as a true approach to what we do.
Definitely. And I think you're so right on that. You really hit the nail right on the head in terms of, because I think there is a lot of messaging, and obviously everyone knows the messaging behind a push for sustainability.
Yeah.
But empty words are empty words. And I think you're spot on. So
yeah. There's a little like hot topics in this industry, especially, right?
Definitely.
So we need to start moving away from things that are just topics of discussion, ideals, right? I mean, ideals are great, but how do we move beyond that and really implement? And
totally. Let's kind of transition a little bit, Karen, to I'm really excited. This is a really fun section I want to get into, which is the kind of the Instagram section of this podcast. For me, I don't know if a lot of people know you like this, but for me at least, I saw you first on Instagram, and I'm learning all these different things about you now, right? So there's so much more behind just the Instagram page, which is so cool. But of course, let's talk about the first kind of thing I want to address, which is your username on Instagram, which is it's Liberty and Fox, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
What is the purpose behind that, or what is the reason behind the naming?
Yeah. I get questioned on that a fair bit. Liberty and Fox was, so when I moved from Australia to New York, it was a name that I set up as both a small freelance company and a blog name as well. And, like Liberty was kind of this indirect nod towards New York. And Fox was this kind of tongue-in-cheek, nod towards me, I guess you could say, as a female.
Yeah, totally.
And just the wording sort of came together. And that's what I was sort of using as this, not persona or Instagram handle at the time necessarily, but kind of this, this business name. And at the time I moved to New York, initially I was freelancing, and I was doing freelance consulting for brands back in Australia. Brand consulting, market research, that kind of thing. So I was, was operating under that name, and then I set up a little bit of a blog, a little bit of a page where I was also channeling that same kind of energy, and it was very much about styling and trend and
right.
And it then just sort of further evolved into the page that it is today.
That's so cool. And I feel like people associate, like, I don't know about you, but for me, like, sometimes when someone has like a unique username, like my mind just associates that name just so quickly, like, oh, it's Liberty and Fox, so she just posted. Oh, okay, that's what she's doing today. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's amazing how then we become this name, these words.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? That it's such a strange like attachment, but detachment, because
it's not really,
it's not really, a true reflection of everything that goes on.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So your Instagram, it's pretty wonderfully composed up until the point I've seen it at. You have some fashion items, you have, outfits and inspiration, things of that nature. But you also have, these small quotes embedded throughout the page. What purpose do those kind of things serve? The quotes in particular, and then we can maybe dive into like your personal style a little bit.
Yeah. The quotes are something that I also find inspiration in, and I think for me, creativity is not one-dimensional. I guess you could say I'm a very visual person, but I take visual cues from style, outfitting, photography, color, texture, words, sentences, so those quotes that I post, even just words that I post, have more to them. Sometimes it for me, it creates the inspiration, it creates a mood or a feeling that I connect to, and then I connect back to true visuals as well. And it's all interrelated to me in a creative sort of way. And what I love is kind of the feedback that I get on it as well, is that it's sort of I get a lot of feedback that it evokes a feeling or a mood in someone else.
Definitely.
And sometimes, and most of the time, it's geared towards a feeling of growth, balance, those vibes.
Definitely.
But for me, it's all creatively sort of intertwined. It's not just about fits. It's not just about sneakers. It's kind of all one and the same. Creatively. Yeah.
And I actually really appreciate that, because I think for a lot of people, Instagram accounts, it can be too much about the fits and the fashion. And I think, the ability to inspire or to motivate or to just kind of spark something in others, like, even though it doesn't perform well, in terms of algorithm, in terms of social media statistics, the impact is what is really important. And I think that's really, really dope. I think one of the ones I read recently was, be the energy you want to receive. And I love that, because oftentimes you find yourself in a cycle of just being down, I guess you can call it, right? And sometimes you have to recognize that, just think about it differently, maybe put that energy out that you want to receive. I love that.
Yeah,
So
no, that's exactly right. I think yeah, it's you know, we again, the Instagram world, you know, we can get kind of caught up in algorithms and comparison, like you touched on earlier, and you know, I think that the and it's you know, each to their own. That's the other thing, right?
of
Whatever
course.
you feel great about doing, you know, they should do, and like more of that. For me, you know, I find enjoyment, creativity, balance in the mixture of all of it, you
Yeah.
know. Um, so yeah, yeah,
How would you describe your style? I'm curious to hear this.
yeah. Uh, Relaxed, comfortable,
Hmm.
um, for sure. You know, cozy. The word cozy comes up on my page like all the time.
Very, it looks very cozy.
Cozy, yeah, cozy. I guess is
Even in your ALD shirt right now, you look cozy.
that, right? Relaxed, comfortable, simple, cozy. You know, I guess you could say I lean more towards what would have been called previously called more of a tomboy kind of
Mm,
style.
mm,
You know, and I think the great thing about today, where we're headed, is that, you know, those labels don't necessarily, shouldn't really exist anymore. It's, you know, more about just what you feel comfortable in. So whether I'm shopping in, you know, a more traditional men's space or more
mm.
traditional women's space, it's really about what I feel comfortable in, on my body, you know, shapes that I feel good in, shapes, styles
Totally.
I feel good in. And yeah, I probably, you know, I lean towards, definitely lean towards vintage pieces, um, things that are inspired by sport, a lot of sporting bomber jackets and
Yeah.
jerseys, and you know, casual gear like that, and really mixing it up with vintage pieces. You know, denim is a big one for me. I love denim. I love a lot of vintage denim.
Mm,
You know, so it's really that sort of mix of comfort and elevating comfort in a way.
I
You
love
know,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, I think your outfits are some of the most inspiring and just some of the most just like she looks good and she looks like just it just looks good. It just flows well together and it's chill.
It's cool, good flow. Yeah, I feel like that you know, I appreciate that because it's all about being authentic as well, right?
Truly, truly.
It's like it should be a true representation of what I feel best in. Yeah.
I love that. And what about, obviously one of my favorite things to talk about is sneakers.
Mm.
You seem to have quite the collection of sneakers. Do you have a favorite sneaker at the moment that you're wearing or a couple sneakers that you've been wearing and loving?
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a few. You're right. I mean, we all do. Our collections have grown over the years.
Totally.
I think I it's probably quite obvious, like ALDs, you know, New Balance 550, right? Yeah,
Yeah, chef's
total. That's
kiss.
it.
Yeah,
I just think, I mean, they're pretty exceptional what they've been able to do to revive that style and the history of that style in a modern way, in a modern adaptation, as part of, I think, as part of a collaboration, but then also into their mainline assortment.
mm-hmm.
Um, you know, I think that the team at New Balance have done an exceptional job, you know, with a lot of what they've done, you know, over recent months, recent years. So, but for me, yeah, I keep going back to that 550 for sure. It's definitely in the rotation, and
Comfortable.
yeah, and I think New Balance in general. I mean, you know, I kind of live in like 991s, 992s.
Mm.
So, you know, for me, maybe it's just like getting older as well. I don't know, but the comfort is definitely there, and the style is there, and yeah, for sure, a lot of New Balance in my rotation now.
Definitely. I love New Balance as well. I just got both of the 550s, the new ones for the springtime. I need to get a pair of 992s. I literally live in 990 V4s. My favorite New Balance model, very sporty, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a New Balance boy at this point, and
Yeah. Which
I love them.
like I think if we had this conversation a few years ago, and I'm sure many people, were the same. Like, I mean, I was definitely like a Nike kind of loyalist, I guess you could sort of say. And I,
Right.
grew up like wearing a lot of Nike, working with Nike, obviously. And, and like the Jordan 1 is probably still one of my favorite shoes. And
Of course, yeah.
my my Jordan collection, like of some of my favorites, by far, but I think, yeah, it's I'm definitely not only about hype. I love classics and I love comfort and style as a whole. So, the mix of it's important to me. Yeah.
Definitely. You don't seem like you're all about hype. I mean, I think you really it comes off as you enjoy what you enjoy. So I don't think
Yeah.
anyone's
And I
accusing you.
wear them. And I wear them. There's nothing there sitting in a box for me. I
Yeah,
enjoy
totally.
wearing them. Yeah.
Totally. I do too. I mean, if I don't wear my sneakers, honestly, if I have a sneaker that I own and I just haven't worn it and I just don't feel inclined, I'll just get rid of it. Because at the end of the day, like it's better for me, for someone else to have that enjoyment of owning the sneaker and
Yeah.
wearing it because
Yeah.
yeah, I think they're meant to be worn. That's my hot take.
Totally. Or I mean, if you want to give it to someone that wants to put in their collection and keep it as part of their collection that they don't wear, that's cool. That's cool too.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, I like creases. I like creases. I like stuffing things up a little bit. I don't know. Maybe it's part
Same.
of the whole relaxed approach to the way that we
Totally.
dress as well.
Totally. And I think New Balances and a lot of sneakers, they look good kind of, worn in, I think more so than just like in the pristine condition.
I
So,
agree. Yeah.
and I think you're also right. Obviously, anyone listening, no one here is saying you have to do it this way. I'll never be that type of person. Everyone, has different strokes for different folks. Everyone does their own kind of thing, and they should be able to live their life according to what they believe and what they value. So,
Right.
let's get into the last. I have two more questions left for you, and then I have a final question to ask you about, your social media. You've been a fantastic guest. Literally, I'm so excited to get this thing uploaded because I know a lot of people are gonna enjoy this.
Thank you.
Um, what, and we're kind of going back to your role, what you do now, your work, and basically inspiring and kind of teaching, like you had mentioned before, teaching young creatives about how to maybe navigate in the world of fashion right now, right? For lack of better words. So the question is, what is one piece of advice you have for aspiring creatives or individuals who want to enter into a fashion career?
I think it's important to check your intentions, like fashion is not just about ego. It's not always a glamorous place to work. It's hard work. It's long hours.
Mm,
It's team effort. It's working with a lot of personality types. There's a lot of things that go into it that are not just this label of fashion, right? So yeah, I
right.
think it's important to really check what your intentions are and what you're willing to give into it. And I think, that to be successful in this industry, in a way, you always have to be working one step ahead.
Mm,
You're always, if you want to be successful, you should always be aiming for more. You should always be sort of giving more,
mm,
and just have a great attitude. Just be a good person.
yeah.
Sometimes we can get caught up in the stress of it, and I think we all do, with career and life. But just being a good person, being a great teammate, being collaborative is really, really important. And I think if you check all those things off, you're willing to work hard, willing to put in, willing to collaborate, and I think you're guaranteed a fruitful career. It's really just what you bring into it and the mindset that you bring into it and your work ethic.
Totally. I love that. No one wants to work with an asshole. That's for sure. And
No, and there's a lot of them. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's so true. And uh yeah, I can you can think about, the moments in which someone is treated you poorly, whether it's a retail space, whether it's out at dinner, you just don't want those people around you. And I think you're right on the head when you say you got to have a great attitude.
Yeah.
One of the last questions I want to ask you is the question of, above all else, what do you want people to know about you that they would have known if they hadn't listened to this podcast? I think
Mm,
that's a really fun one.
mm. Yeah, this is a hard one, and I think what we touched on a couple times about Instagram and persona, and
Mm,
hopefully you've learned more about me from this conversation as others will, as they listen.
yeah,
Um, but just I'm grateful for connecting with people like you and other people that I've met through, these new forms of social media, these new platforms to connect
mm,
with others. And I think what's really important for me that kind of takes me back to the first thing we spoke about with like growing up and how I grew up and what I loved about it is this new formation of community,
mm,
right? So it's, especially with what we've all been living through, over the past year and the way that the world is and how, how crazy and how crazy things have been, because of so many things and so many issues, like that sense of community and connection that some of these platforms has created, I think is just a pretty incredible thing, and
mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily just about me, but yeah, I think that's just something that I've really valued over the past year, especially following people, connecting with people, having conversations with people that are not only about, outfits and not only about sneakers, but about growing a career,
Yeah,
about, you know, mental health, about issues going on in the world. There's so many avenues to connect. And I think, yeah, that's definitely like a highlight of my past year is being
totally.
able to connect on those levels, with these amazing sort of communities of people, especially through social media. Yeah.
Definitely. I love that answer. And I appreciate you so much because for saying that, because I think the community aspect that I'm also trying to create with the podcast and
Yeah.
with the content that I create, I can see it manifesting every day a little bit more and more. And just by you accepting to come on the show, you have no idea how grateful I am because, so many more people will learn about you. So many more people will learn about the podcast. And I heard a really interesting fact the other day, and we'll conclude on this, and then I'll ask you, how can people find out about you? But we'll conclude on this. And it was that if you host, so I host a podcast every week, essentially. I've been doing it for almost a year, and it's about 30 to 40 minutes. There might be someone who listens to this podcast week in and week out who listens to the sound of my voice more than their own parents every
Mm,
week. And I heard that, I was like, whoa,
it's powerful.
that means I have an opportunity and somewhat of an obligate, not obligation, but opportunity to, feed them information that brings them value, but also, like you said, no one wants to work with an asshole to remind them to show kindness,
Hmm.
to put mental health at the forefront,
Hmm.
to think about sustainability in fashion and to talk about it and act on it, to learn something new from an individual as yourself. And so I get chills because I'm so like excited, and it's been a great episode. Where can people find out more about you, Karen?
I love that, Drew. Nice wrap up. Powerful what you're doing. And I love what you're doing here. This is a great outlet. Um, Liberty and Fox, that's the space in which I play creatively. If you want to, a welcome conversation around the things that we spoke about, and yeah, I'm not a, that's enough for me. Like
Perfect.
like I'm beyond. I'm not in TikTok. I'm not on Facebook anymore. I'm not. It's just Instagram, and that's kind of where I play. And yeah, that's enough to suffice me my social media needs, I think. Yeah.
Totally. All right. Awesome having you on. We'll talk soon, okay?
Thanks so much.
What did you guys think of the podcast? Did you enjoy it? If you made it this far in the video, give me a comment that says what your predictions are for the NBA finals and the playoffs and all those kind of things that are coming up if you're a basketball fan. See you guys in the next video on Sunday. It's going to be a really good one. Peace.